BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good morning. Today, beekeepers are advised to check their hives for a virus which paralyses bees. Scientists say they're working hard to minimise its impact.
Beekeepers feel that their colony was fine one week, but when they go back the next week, they see these mass die-off of bees, and there's a big pile of dead bees there that wasn't there just the week before.
We'll have more later. First, yesterday we heard a report by journalists at Watershed Investigations and The Guardian, which said the amount of water licensed to be abstracted for farming from rivers and lakes has more than doubled in 5 years. Their research also raised concerns about how abstractions are monitored. After hearing that, Lindsay Hargreaves, who chairs the River Lark Abstractors group of about 40 farmers in West Suffolk, wrote to us to put their point of view. He has decades of experience in managing water for farming. We also had an email from a listener who wanted to know how water abstraction is actually done. So first, I asked him how it works.
Abstraction that's the technical term for taking water from the natural environment, either from open rivers, from surface waters, or from groundwater, so through borehole water. And we can only do that if we hold a licence. Now, there are very small exceptions to taking water without a licence, but by far the greater majority of all water taken from the natural environment is done under a licence issued by the Environment Agency.
And do you just stick a pipe in the river and then pump it up? Does it have a sort of dial on it to say how much you've taken?
In its most simplistic terms, that's right. But of course, the process leading up to sticking your pipe in the river is long and involved and costly. You can't just abstract it from anywhere. Your licence will tell you precisely, down to a few metres, where you will take that water from. And when you do start taking the water out, yes, it is metered. And on most licences, the requirement is to read the meter every 24 hours, every day. And you have to submit those readings on an annual basis.
And the licence, I believe, does also say how much you're allowed to take and when you can take it.
Indeed, it does. So in terms of when, typically licences will be issued to allow water to be taken either during the winter months or during the summer months or all year round. And that will depend on the circumstances of where you're taking the water from, what you want to use it for, and what you applied to the agency for permission to do. And in terms of how much, so the total amount of water in cubic metres that you can abstract in a year, that is set out in very precise terms, as is the amount that you can take in a 24-hour period and in litres per second.
People maybe think that farmers just want to take as much as they can.
It is not in our interest to exceed our licensed quantities, and the penalties for doing so are quite severe, not only in financial and regulatory terms, but also in damaging the environment. This regulation is there for a purpose, and that purpose is to protect the environment, to protect the water body that we're abstracting from.
In Yorkshire, there's a hosepipe ban just announced. Now, does that sort of thing affect the amount that you're allowed to take? Does it change your licence agreement at all?
As a farmer with an abstraction licence issued by the Environment Agency, my relationship is between me and the Environment Agency. When it comes to hosepipe bans on public water supply, there the relationship is between the using customer, the householder, and the water company who's providing the water. That water company will in turn have abstraction licences with the Environment Agency to take the water that they are subsequently passing on. This is an emotive area. These so-called temporary use bans or tubs, hosepipe bans. My licence is not necessarily affected by a hosepipe ban that's declared by a water company. But there are other measures that can restrict the water that I take in the absence of a hosepipe ban. So, for example, in my area now, there are abstractors who are no longer allowed to abstract, either because the flow in their river or somewhere nearby has reached a trigger point below which you're no longer allowed to abstract until that flow rate increases again. It's called a hands-off flow restriction, so we just have to stop. And of course it's a bit of a frustration for farmers when they are told to stop because of that, and yet there is no hosepipe ban. So round here where we've got farmers who cannot irrigate, but I can still water my garden. Many farmers are reassessing the way they access water and the way they make their water more secure. So what farmers are moving towards doing is investing in storage reservoirs so they can take their water during the winter months when river flows are higher and hold that water until the summer months.
Lindsay Hargreaves, chair of the River Lark Abstractors Group. Now, we move on to more salty waters because all this week we're looking at shellfish. It's the start of the summer lobster season as these crustaceans who've just grown new shells and eaten little for weeks start moving around to find more food. Bridlington in East Yorkshire is the largest lobster port in Europe, landing about 500 tonnes a year, according to DEFRA figures for 2021. There are no quotas for catching crab and lobster, and most of it is exported. Sarah Falkingham has been to see the harbourside operation.
I'm at the end of Bridlington Pier on an overcast summer's day, and there are about 40 fishing boats here, and there are men here in their yellow aprons and yellow wellies and forklift trucks running around loading and unloading. And I've come to meet Joe Ackers, who's the secretary of the Independent Shellfishermen's Cooperative from Bridlington.
It's mostly shellfish. We have a little bit of finfish as well. Lobster, crab, brown crab, bit of velvet crab, whelks.
So let's go into one of these sheds here where I can see lots of bubbling tanks, and this is where the lobster are put once they are landed. We're passing some crates of crabs here, stepping through all the water flowing.
This is lobster. It's separated into different grades. So we have cripple lobster where it's missing a claw or it's got one smaller than the other. We've got select lobster, which is the prime size and grade. And then we've got large lobster, which is anything over 1.3 kilos.
And why does it all go abroad? We see about 70-80% is all exported.
It's demand, really. We import a lot of the fish that we eat and we export a lot that we catch.
So we don't eat much lobster, but we eat a lot of...
We have a big five. It's salmon, tuna, cod, haddock, prawns. They're our big five, and we have to import all of that. Lobster, it's a prime product, it's not cheap, and the Europeans like it.
And where are you sending it to?
France, Spain, Portugal, and from there it will get distributed into other parts of Europe as well.
Well, let's step back outside again to the main part of the pier with forklift trucks going past. I can see loads of lobster pots here as well. Recently there was a new deal done which basically reopens for another 12 years the waters here to European fishing boats as well. How's that news landed amongst the fishermen here?
I think fishermen all over the country are very angry about it. The UK waters were promised during all of that Brexit campaigning to be given back to the fishermen, and it's not happened. Europeans have historic rights to these waters, and I'm afraid that's just not going to go away.
So what's the effect if the trawlers are going to come back next year like they have for the last few years? How does that affect the men here?
We have potential gear conflicts because there's not a lot of fin fishing here. They will be targeting different species to the ones we are, but if they're trawling over grounds that have got pots on, then they could destroy our fishermen's gear.
So the trawler nets can disturb all the pots that are on the seabed?
Potentially, yes, yeah.
And on the plus side, part of the deal was to relax some of the paperwork for exporting. Does that make your life easier as an exporter now?
It will do when it actually happens, if it happens. From what I understand, it could be 18 months or even up to 4 years before this actually happens. So currently we're paying £200 every time we export. So although it was part of the good news story, it's going to be a long time before it takes an effect, by the sounds.
Joe Ackers there from the Independent Shellfishermen's Cooperative in Bridlington. Now, we've had an email from a listener, Stephen Orty at Southern Counties Honey, alerting us to a viral disease which paralyses bees and which is on the increase. Chronic bee paralysis has been in bee populations for many years, but cases are rising in the UK and it's estimated up to 2% are affected. The disease is not notifiable, so doesn't have to be reported, and bees can have the virus and not show symptoms, so its prevalence is difficult to ascertain. Professor Giles Budge is Director of Research and Innovation at the School of Natural and Environmental Sciences at Newcastle University. He joined me from his laboratory where he's currently working on the disease and told me how it affects bees.
It's a disease which causes some shaking symptoms. It affects their neural cells, so it affects their neurons, and it moves over a few days from perhaps showing those sort of more light symptoms like shaking through to partial paralysis, where sometimes half of their legs don't work and they sometimes go in circles, through to complete paralysis within a week or so. So once you have complete paralysis, those individual bees will unfortunately die.
And how is it spread?
It can be spread between bees by the bees rubbing up against each other, something we call mechanical transmission, or it can be spread by fecal-oral transmission. So honeybees spend quite a lot of time sharing food, and the virus can pass from one infected bee to a healthy bee, can really spread around. And I think that's probably one of the features of the disease, is that beekeepers feel that their colony was fine one week, but when they go back the next week, they see these mass die-off of bees where there can be tens of thousands of bees dying on the bottom board at the bottom of the colony, or being thrown out the front of the colony, and there's a big pile of dead bees there that wasn't there just the week before.
And do we know where it's come from?
So chronic bee paralysis virus has been associated with honeybees for many thousands of years. The symptoms are well described by people like Aristotle. So we know that the disease itself is quite an ancient disease. What we are seeing more frequently in recent years are these outbreaks in colonies.
And so I presume the government must be fairly aware of this disease as it's been here for some time. How much effort and funding has there been put towards addressing it?
Yeah, the National Bee Unit and DEFRA are both very aware that the disease occurs. It's not a statutory notifiable disease, so it's not a disease that comes under legislation for bee health. We have had some funding up at Newcastle University in the past to look at this disease. So there has been funding put into this area. We're not quite at the stage yet where we feel we can suggest controls for beekeepers, for instance. So there's still some more work to do. There's an awful lot to do in bee health, and this is one disease amongst a plethora of diseases, and this one's not statutorily notifiable. So I can see why perhaps there aren't active programs of control for this particular disease.
Is there treatment available that could be used against this virus?
So at the moment we've been trying to develop some treatments, and we're still in the experimental stage. So at the moment we don't have particular recommendations apart from some good practice guide really about looking after those bees when they die that land on the bottom board or are thrown out the front of the colony. They can actually be incredibly infectious, so it's worth removing those from the apiary. Try to put wider entrances on colonies to help the bees to throw out those dead or moribund bees that are carrying very high levels of the virus. So there are some things that we can tell beekeepers that we've got good evidence for.
Professor Giles Budge. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.